now very, very pleased to welcome Stu Robson. One of the reasons I'm excited about this is just to say the name of his company that he's always twisted, but I'm not sure if it's him or the name of the company. So he's a web developer. You can see the title of his speech. And Stu isn't local, he's from Salisbury. And we're very lucky that he's agreed to give up his time to come today. And he is rather special, and he'll tell you why. So thank you very much.
Okay, hi. How is everyone doing? Oh, let me catch my breath. So yeah, I'm Stu Robson. I'm a contracting front-end freelance web developer, design systems consultant, advocate type person. It's probably easier to go through a list of things I used to do rather than what I do. I used to run SAS London, which is was a quarterly meetup, which is now London CSS. I used to run SAS News, which Gina now runs. I think that's it. I used to blog, and I used to talk. I stopped a couple of years ago, but Dean asked me, so I couldn't say no to Dean. What I do now, I run a design systems newsletter. That's pretty much what I do outside of work, related stuff. Apart from that, outside of work stuff is family time now. So I'm going to talk to you today about design systems for front-end architecture. Dean texted me on Tuesday saying, how's your talk going? And I was like, okay. He goes, is it 40 minutes? I was like, well, it might be a bit under. He goes, don't forget you're between lunch. You're between people getting their lunch. Your talk is. So I haven't forgotten that, and it's so hopefully it'll be okay. Yeah. So design systems, they're pretty hot right now. Like I said, I curate the design systems newsletter, so I probably read or flick through 40, 50 articles related to design systems every week. And then the newsletter gets published as and when I get to 10 articles, which is one of the reasons why it's kind of sporadic rather than a set time frame. But yeah, lots of companies are building design systems, lots of people are talking about design systems. They're they're so hot. Right now, it does feel like everyone's sort of screaming it these days, and just won't stop. So what we're going to discuss today, we're going to talk about what is a design system, do we need one, where should we start with one, what makes a component quickly, and then how do we maintain it, and a few resources at the end. So what is a design system? In 2016, I wrote an article called Style Guides, Pattern Libraries and Design Languages. It was kind of at the sort of start of lots of people talking about design systems and what they were, and people saying, isn't that just a style guide with a new name and stuff? And was it, I've always called them pattern libraries. Why are they called design systems now? And I think it's kind of different. It's like you get a pattern library and a style guide and a design language. This is in the talk, in the blog post. And the design language, and it's like a Johnny Ball of a thing. The who, what, where, when, why, and how is what makes up a design system. The who and the what and the where of what you're building, and the why and how you're doing it. And I think you can break it down into that. The pattern library is like the who and the what. It's like the what components stuff. The style guide is the how, where, and when. Like where would you use those components? When and how, and then the design language is kind of the why. And I've made a rather rudimentary graphic sort of showing how a design system fits in all that, or takes all that in. But it's quite a basic take, really. There could be quite a few other things in the design system. There are quite a few other things in the design system if you want. I think 2016, Nate Baldwin from Adobe created this image. It was around the same time I wrote the post about what he seems to think is in the design system. So the design system is does the pointer work? Is there a point? I won't try the pointer. Is the outside circle, and then everything inside is within it. I thought I was going to see UX in there, but not. Just to say that seems to be an even bigger part of the circle within the circles. UN Unpin's website, Zach tried to structure it more like this, more systematically into what it is. So you start with building blocks, and then you've got your patterns, and then you've got the rules, and then you push that into a style guide. Jan Tommen came up with this funky little image for what he thinks creates a design system. So you've still got the outer thing of a design system, and then you've got two things within it of the style guide and the component library. And then Varia Stepanova came up with this, where you've got sort of ever-increasing circles to create the pattern design system. And as Alice says in her book Design Systems from Smashing Mag, there's not really a standard definition of design system, and people often use it interchangeably with a pattern library or a style guide. So you get things like this, which is a sketch UI kit, which says it's a design system. You get things like this, which is a React component library, I would say, which says it's a design system. And then you get people saying that your sketch library isn't a design system. And then you get people saying that you shouldn't really be writing everything in React, and everything should be framework agnostic. And this is from 2017, I think, maybe it's the start of last year. And it's a continuing sort of thing within the design systems community, is that we're becoming a bit dogmatic about what is and what isn't a design system. And I quite like this quote I found in a conversation I was having with Gina ages ago, that a design system is about systemizing the design as a noun. So in effect, it's not just for designers kind of thing. It's about the actual whole process of it all. So what do they look like? Luckily, because they are so hot right now, and ever increasingly so, there's lots of public design systems for inspiration. And there's a couple of sites. There's this one from Alex Pate, who creates a GitHub repo of listings of all the public design systems, and splits them with, shows you which have got components, voice and tone for content, designer's kit and source code. And then you've got this one from UXPin Adele, which goes into even more sort of metrics as to whether it's using React or vanilla JavaScript, or whether it's got Sketch and stuff or not. So there's lots of inspiration, lots of existing design systems to take inspiration from. This is probably going to be the first one that was released publicly from Salesforce. It's one Gina worked on. And I think it was released publicly more so because Salesforce has got a lot of third-party app developers and stuff, so it's to sort of gain the consistency of like the Salesforce as the brand within your third-party app. Carbon have made one for IBM for their design system, and if you can see there's similarities between the two with like the getting started and accessibility and guidelines on there, and on this one as well. Pajamas I picked just because of the name from GitLab. But similarly, again, it's got all the things in the sidebar as to what it thinks is their design system, and then you've got the US Web Design Standards system, which sort of changes up a bit with a more of a flow of what it's sort of expressing is the design system. You've got the Gov UK one, which it's more a CSS kit, I'd say, but of a design system. So it talks about that more, it shows that more. And then there's Primer from GitHub, which is the one I take most inspiration from when working. Purely because some of the ideas Diana comes up with and Sean comes up with, I think they're on my wavelength kind of thing. So let's take a quick look into the US Web Design Standards one, just to show kind of the things it's got in there. So you've got options for, is that working? For developers, so let's say things that you can do for, as a developer, so how to install things, the browser support you need, the accessibility stuff. It's installed a Fractal that it uses. For designers, you've got explains that the design why you've got the design system, says it's it's mainly in code, and you've got developer tools that you can play with, but it also provides sketch files as well. And then it goes into like a style guide of a component library, a style guide rather than a component library. So underneath, I haven't got anything that sort of animates, but underneath that it will sort of show the, denote the wheres and the whys of how you use your buttons. And then you've got to click the viewing component library to get to the fractal install. And it also offers some templates as well, so you can download a template and you've got the correct markup for the page, for a sample page to edit on, rather than trying to work out what components go after what components. And then it also gives you a list of other implementations that are using it, such as they've got a SAS version, a Jekyll version, Drupal version, Rails version, and they're all sort of within the US Web Design 18F agency, but they're all feeding from this, so they're not being, it's not supported by USWDS, but it is part of it. So from all those images, you can see that a design system isn't really a project; it's a product that's serving other products. It's either serving, as an agency, it could be serving all of your clients from like a single sort of code base or set of patterns, or as a product, it could be serving sort of, the government or whatever your product is. And also, they look quite cool. They look really, really polished. But the grass is always greener on the other side. And their goals are different to your goals. So in that respect, it's like I saw a post the other day about Bootstrap being a design system, and why there are so many open source design systems. I think most of the reason for open sourcing is why not. It's good for the industry because you get to learn other people's techniques for free, and you've got the inspiration of that, and it's also good for marketing as well. So it's like, we've got this cool design system, come work for us. But it's still got their needs. So Material.io I think just had a recent refresh with IO 19, and they've had some new cool features. But it doesn't mean it's right for your products you're building. So do we need a design system? Yes. So having a design system can afford you consistency, because you've built that button once. You don't have to build it the next time you do another website or another page. You've built that form once. You've built those form elements once. You built that card panel. You built that grid system once, potentially. You don't have to build it again. In that way, it's easier to maintain, because you've got the one single code base, potentially, where you can update one thing and it sort of cascades down to the rest of your products. And in that way, because you've only got you might only have this one source of truth, you can ensure that the quality always improves, rather than, so you've always got that button, and you can improve upon it rather than starting another button pattern component. So this is a screenshot of an interface inventory that Brad Foss took of his bank's website that had a redesign since. And it's a compelling reason as to why to have a design system. I think there's 4 learn more buttons on there. There's 4 sign-on buttons on there. There's 2 go buttons. Of all various shades and gradients and colours and icons or no icons. So in that respect, we're not designing pages, because that clearly is a page and another page and another page from, that was built on time upon time, one after the other, I'd say. We're designing systems of components that create the pages now. Well, I think we should be. We should be. So how to get buy-in? It might not be an easy sell to spend some time to build one whilst you're in the thick of it. But I think it's when you start, it's something you can iterate on for once. It's something you can this week let's pull out of our project and spend a couple of hours building the card pattern out, and then the next time you've got to use a card pattern, you've already got it built. So you're saving time. So it's good. Yes, it's good for that. So for the clients, it's like you're delivering tiny little bootstraps rather than giving them Bootstrap, which you've heavily hacked around with to change all the SAS variables and stuff to get it to work. You're creating your own, your client's own one from wherever you start. There are possibilities of creating your own Bootstrap and then giving your client a tinier Bootstrap of it. It affords you scalability. You'll be more prepared to scale both the design and the front end areas in the future if you've got a design system, because it's also allows creativity. By building a repository of rules and components, you'll spend less time on the pixels and more time to redesign your customer's experience and come up with disruptive solutions. From Dan, design systems take care of the boring 80% of what you need to design, freeing up to concentrate your creativity on the interesting and unique 20% of the time. So you've built that button, which gives you the chance to spend that time where you would have been building the button on, delight. And as Midas puts it, design systems is a foundation, a set of rules, and rules can be broken. And rules and creativity are not mutually exclusive. I always pick the word guide out of style guide. The guide is not like law that you have to follow it. It's there to bend and break when needed. And if you build it well, it's a page for products for themes, which would be really useful for agencies that handle several projects a year. And it's especially important if you're planning to build like white label solutions for third parties. Because you've built that button before, you don't necessarily have to have that time wasted in QA so much. I should find another component of the button to talk about. But yeah, so you've spent that time building that form for this product, and you know it's going to work. You know it works from that product, so the QA, there should be less time in the QA and less bugs to find that were found, if you're lucky. So that sort of speeds things up. And it's good for onboarding. Once your products are consistent, the interfaces will be more predictable, leading to reduced learning curves across the products. So it's onboarding for the end user as well as the team using it as well. And because it's all in one place potentially, it should be faster and easier to update the product's UI if you decide to change, tweak a colour here or tweak a font size there. And design systems, I think, like 95% communication and then 5% code. Lots of people say bridging the gap between designers and developers. I'd rather you close the gap so there's no bridge to walk across. But I think from certain libraries and things that are being built, it seems like developers, and there still is this wall, imaginary wall between designers and developers and teams. So I think to get this adoption, to get the design system up and running, you've got to be open about it. You've got to, we're only working on this. We haven't done this yet. Next iteration, we're going to increase. We're going to finish off building the card pattern. Don't dictate. People don't I don't think they like being told what to do. I don't like being told what to do. And I think that's why there is like a plethora of CSS frameworks. I think 2012 I was talking about CSS frameworks and saying there are so many. Build your own, because everyone else is for them, not necessarily for you. I think Eric Mayer spoke about it in 2006, similar sort of thing, about CSS frameworks as well. And that's part of the reason why there's so many, because of potentially because use this one. No, I don't want to use this one. I'll use that one. I'll make my own. So if you don't dictate and you're open, you should get. If you're working in an organisation that's got loads of teams that could potentially be using a design system, hopefully it will sort of gain some adoption. Listen to the concerns that people have with it. Don't shut them off. Take note, take heed, try and work upon it. Move with existing workflows. So try not to sort of throw a grenade into the works and say this is how we're going to do stuff now. see where you've got gaps where you can improve their productivity or your productivity with a design system or part of it, or be where the authors are is another way to say that. Right, so I kind of think there's two ways if you're working within a product or a team or an agency that hasn't got a design system and you want to sort of start off of one, and this is from personal experience, that what worked and what didn't work. So I'm ET, I've been parachuted in as a consultant for a company that just got a brand new redesign in 2015, I think it was. And I was hired to sort of build upon that to create a design system from it, so that hopefully the other companies within the company will start using it as well, and there'll be sort of one systematic design language. So the first approach we took was like Independence Day, which was like, boom, here it is, we're all using this, and we dictated. And the second one was, that's really the wrong poster for it because that's the analogy, but the second one, we kind of snuck in from behind, snuck in from like where we could see the gaps to fill in, to create create sort of an easier experience for the people using stuff. And yeah, so that's that. And the quotes from the faculty is that if you're an alien invading Earth, would you want to go all out Independence Day, blow up the White House, or would you rather sneak through the back door, kind of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers? So where should we start with a design system if we're going to start on this? Journey. I think you might want to. You could start with both of these. You could start with the doorknobs, and you could end up with a cathedral, or you could start with the cathedral and work your way down to a doorknob. It's whatever suits you. So you could start with page. Well, I'd say start with pages or parts of pages, rather than go, let's build the button, then let's build the card, and let's build the layout for this. Let's build this article, not item. You want to sort of iterate and sort of continually go back and round and round and round in circles for a bit to sort of get the larger view from 10,000 feet, as well as like the view from being in the thick of it. Design principles are a good way to start. From Sarah and Tori's book, Building Design Systems, they say a robust design system contain guiding design principles. There's a great website from a friend Ben, Principles.Design, I think it's called, with 106 different company design principles on there. So design principles are a set of considerations that form the basis of your product. You should use them because it helps teams with decision making. If you create a few simple principles or constructive questions, it will guide your team towards making the appropriate decisions when they're building things. And really, it's something that organisations, individuals, product teams can benefit from writing them and following them, whether it's if it's for a white label product or various other things. This is from Salesforce. They're quite succinct. Principles are clarity, efficiency, consistency, and beauty. From Mozilla's design system, I've forgotten the name of, Protocol, it's got to be meaningful, flexible, accessible, global, and useful. I mean, you could say accessible to all. Some of these things you might think they're a given, but having them written down means that you can refer back to them when you're building stuff. Have we answered these? Are we being guided by these in what we're building? The government design principles are quite a little bit longer, and I think each of those, each of the contents expanded in more terms as to what they actually mean by what they are. Design tokens is kind of, I'd say, if you've kind of got the product in the works, the next thing to go for. So design tokens are the visual atoms of the design system. Specifically, they are named entities that store visual design attributes. This is from Salesforce, so they use them in place of hard-coded values such as hex values for color or pixels for spacing in order to maintain a scalable and consistent visual system. So things that can become design tokens are color. This one sort of just gives you the variable names and the value. Then you've got ones that sort of do the same. They actually show the color and they give you a nice little. This one's really cool because it gives you a accessibility ratio, whether it's going to pass or not on black or white backgrounds. So if you want to use it for text, typography. So the fonts you're actually going to use, the sizes you're going to use, and the line heights you're going to use. Icons can be part of your design tokens. Spacing, so you know how big things are. Borders, including like widths, colours, and like the radius. Shadows, you're going to have text shadows, box shadows. Time is another one that's rarely seen in design systems, really. So how much your hover state is going to take to hover and stuff like that. Breakpoints for the web. But aren't these just SAS variables, really, at the end of the day? I don't think they are. Design tokens are an abstraction for everything impacting the visual design of the app or platform, which means that having the design tokens, you should be able to extrapolate that for your iOS app or for your Android app or to use in Sketch. There are tools for that. This one's from Salesforce that sort of pioneered design tokens. It's called Theo. And essentially what you can do is provide it with a YAML file or a JSON file of key value pairs, and it will then convert that to pretty much whatever you want for CSS variables, SAS variables, less variables, iOS, whatever they use, whatever your Android uses. You can also create your own formats as well. So we, for my current client, we tie font size, line height, and the font weight in the same breath, as it were. So we've created a format that will pass the JSON file and spit out all three bits of SAS as a map. Style dictionaries from Amazon. It's very similar to Theo's one. It does things slightly differently. You can also export this one to sketch files, and I think you can do it to whatever Adobe uses for their color palettes as well. There are, and if you wanted to do that anyway, you could create some tooling to because there are sort of JSON to Adobe palette generator, like NVM modules that you can sort of do that to, so you can add to it as well if you wanted to. But that's taking it from a code point of view and turning it into more code and sketch files. Polaris from Spotify do it the other way around. They take the attributes from your sketch file, the colours from your sketch file, and font sizes from your sketch file, and then turn them into CSS variables and SAS properties. I've got a GitHub repo. If you search for GitHub for awesome design tokens, where I try and keep sort of live sites that you use it, GitHub repos, articles about it as well. So there's that. So design tokens, we've done design principles. So how are we going to be composing the code of these components? Brad Frost created this front-end guidelines questionnaire, which I think is really handy. It's quite a beast of a page, really. It might be something you want to take in chunks rather than go all the way through in one sitting to determine sort of, are you going to use spaces or tabs in your CSS? Banal things like that. But if you get them sort of nailed, there's no reason to argue down the line as to why someone started using 8 spaces rather than a tab of 2. something. Do you want to use a templating language? I'm a big believer in being as close to the metal as possible and just using HTML, CSS and JavaScript, even though saying that I do use Sass, and in saying that I do use Nunjucks, but it's trying to be still within that is trying to be as close to the HTML as possible, but some things make it, your life easier to create components, especially when you've got a button with three primary, secondary, tertiary button, and then you've got an outline button like a ghost button, and then you've got all the different states as well. Sometimes it's a benefit to use a templating language just to help you, more easily maintain sort of one component. And then, yes, oh no, it's big images. So yeah, do you want to use a CSS preprocessor? Because they're still about. Not everyone's quitting Sass in 2019. Or do you what tool, what task manager kind of thing do you want to use to sort of help you build your design system, like Gulp or Grunt or Webpack or Parcel? Or do you want to go all in and use a modern React, JavaScript framework like React, Preact? Angular's just come out of some new version which has got some cool stuff in, or Vue. Yeah, like I said, I have opinions on whether to use a JavaScript framework or not. I think the design system should be as platform agnostic as possible, because then it meets like a more, it can be put in more places than one. Really, I saw this tweet on Twitter, and I've been retweeting it every sort of 6 hours since to try and get some, because polls on Twitter are rubbish because I always pick the stupid answer. So, but out of this is like, if you're designing at the front end of a design system, what stack would you use? And I was quite surprised. I would have thought, React, from what we hear, I'd have thought that would be quite higher up than it is, but it's not. And what methodology are we going to be using to sort of create the HTML and the CSS? Are we going to go with object-oriented CSS from Nicole Sullivan, or BEM from, I can't remember the Russian search engine, but that's where from. SMAC's, Scalable Modular Architecture for CSS from Jonathan Snook, or It's from Harry Roberts, or this is my favourite from Una, which is Ubemits, which I managed to get her to write an article about for SitePoint back in the day when I was a tech editor there, which sort of, moulds it all into one, or write your own. And then how do you want to split up your components? This one's quite a big one. So you start with like your button, and then you create your form, and then on and on and on. So atoms, molecules, organisms. I'm always poised when it gets to templates, just because it kind of skews off from the science field of it. In Sarah and Laurie's book, Building Design Systems, they go for GitLab. They went with layout, styles, components, and regions. So you'd have like the grid. Then you have your basic styles for your typography and buttons and things, and then you have your components that the text and the buttons are made of, and then the regions, which are the parts of the page that fit within the layout. Namespacing, when you're starting to write CSS, is a good thing. So it's kind of a good thing. It didn't work for us. Lots of people that do atomic design follow this kind of thing for writing CSS. I don't think Brad does. I think he kind of uses the its way of writing CSS. And it's like, I think he's not really a fan of people kind of shoehorning the two, like atomic design and CSS together as the same sort of thing. So on atomic design, I work, at the moment I'm contracting with EMBL, which stands for the European Molecular Biological Laboratory. This is their campus in Heidelberg. So we started off with, we are taking an atomic design approach, but we can't really call things atoms or molecules or organisms, because as the organisation, they work with life science, so it could get confusing when talking to stakeholders about the molecules we're playing with. So we went with what we've worked with before, which is elements, blocks, and containers and pages. So you've got your buttons and your text and your form elements as elements. And you've got your blocks, which is like a card, and then your container is like a vertical strip of the page, and then the page. You could be serving many teams or many products with your design system, so it could be a good way to namespace the product type. So, for example, for life sciences, we've got a generic, for EMBL, we've got a generic sort of component library, which is the visual framework, so we start with VF for things like that. But then we've also got product or team-specific things like the EMBL grid is something that only the EMBL.de website will be using, so it's got its namespace slightly differently, just to, so you can tell. And then you need to write some guidelines for it. There's many options on the internet to sort of take some guidance and inspiration from. It just helps the maintainability of things if things are written down as well as it's like the design principles. You can refer back to them if there's an issue in your PR that someone's using camel case. But you can get away with lots of that as well just by using linting to lint your code. And there's options to style lint if you're for your CSS, you can use that. There's csslint.org, I think. Can't read that. Which is an online. You drop in your CSS and it tells you what you're doing wrong. That's from Nicole Sullivan. And there's Prettier, which kind of you just tell it, set it and forget it, and it just makes everything prettier. There's opinions on it or not. Depends. And there's ESLint and there's JSLint as well for JavaScript. So what makes a component? So this is a button. I've been banging on about buttons for the last 20 minutes or so. So this is a button. Quite simple, but there's lots of variants to this button, and there's lots of options for it. So you've got the typography of the button, the palette that you're going to be using for it, the borders of the button, the shadow, where it's going to shadow, the spacing of it, and then you've got the interaction stage, which are all the above again for each one. So for typography, you've got to pick your font family, font size, font weight, and text transform, and then for your palette, you've got your text color and your background color. And for your borders, you've got the color, the style, the width, and the radius. And then for spacing, you've got your padding, and you've got your margin. And then for your interactive states, you've got your hover text color, hover background color, box shadow, focus colors. And then you've got a transition duration and what you want to transition, and the timing function as well for when people hover over it as well. So you've got your button with rounded corners, with a box shadow, a big button, an outline or a ghost button, and then and a larger button. Going back to Karen's talk, I'd probably try and get some content in there rather than I am a button, just to make it a bit more real. And if you aren't explicit in the way an object's hover states, touch states, open or closed states are going to be, then chances are they'll be overlooked and not built. So be explicit when you're working out these. And they can all come from the design tokens. You can either map them one-to-one. You can map, so you've got your design tokens, colors, and then you can map them to just like background color, this design token, or you could do it. You could add another layer of abstraction on top of that, so you've got so you're sort of creating a variable from a variable to. So it depends. For that, it depends on where you're going to use it. Do I get to that? Yeah, depends where you're going to use it. Back last May, my client decided they wanted a brand family component for the website, but it was to be used not just on their main website. So being close to the metal and having good documentation and having all those sort of states and variables decided means that I could have built this. We managed to build this not only for monotype.com, but for fonts.com, Linotype, Olopic, Swift, and it ended up being 9 products, not 8. Out of one pattern with 2 variants, and if you look through them, they've all got their own, brand typography in there and colours in there as well. And this was also because we chose HTML and SAS or CSS really to sort of create the components to start with. It meant that it could be just easily adopted into ASP.NET, PHP, Ruby on Rails, an Angular product using Backbone, and a product using Vue. And there was 2 options for them. They could use the SAS version where they could override the variables locally, or they could. We also, with the component library, provide the static CSS so they could literally just copy and paste it into place. Okay, so how do we maintain a design system? Design systems need to be easy and desirable to be used by teams. So you're going to want something to put them in. This is Pattern Lab from Brad Frost and David, his name escapes me, which is a component library generator. This is something that pulls in stuff from Pattern Lab to create like a more of a design system style guide product. My favourite is Fractal. So essentially, for this one, you can give it HTML, CSS, and it will, and in a folder for each pattern, and it will create a nice UI so you can sort of test your components in. And there's a storybook as well, which I didn't realise there's so many options you could use it with now. I knew HTML was one, but I didn't know you could use it for Ember and Angular until recently. Distribution. So you've built the thing. How do you get it out to people? So you could use npm, upload it to there, and then they can npm installed into their code base. Or you could work on top of that with Yarn, and then use Yarn's workspaces where you could generate a module for each component, which is a new thing in Yarn, because before that there was Learner. So essentially you'd have the pattern library as an npm module, and then each component within the pattern library will be an npm module as well. So it's like a buffet, so you can pick your own bits of the design system that you want to use rather than have to take the whole thing wholesale. There's a really long detailed post from Cloud4 on how to distribute a pattern library as an npm package, and from a private repo. So that's all about scoping and that bit as well. So it gets to a point where you can npm install my components as the whole thing, or I think the best thing is to get it just install the bits you need. So versioning, use GitHub or some sort of source control to create it, to keep it and update it and tag it. To use something like semantic versioning to decide what's a minor, major, or patch release. So when you add a new pattern, you could say that I would say that's a minor release because you're not really affecting too much. But if you're all of a sudden ripping apart your card pattern and changing everything in it, that's that's a major release because it's going to break everybody's site. Or if you've changed the masthead code recently and didn't get the people that are working on the WordPress sites to update that they knew about the HTMLs changing, it just looks bloody awful. Testing, you want to test because it helps you sort of make sure things are the same. You haven't changed anything when you're battling in with the code. It also should help speed up QA as well, which is always a good thing. There's several ways of doing that. You can do some visual regression testing with like Percy, which is a paid-for service unless you're open source, where you get to do it free. And it takes Backstock's the same. That's completely open source. It basically takes a snapshot of your component library, and then the next time you play with stuff, you can take more snapshots and reference the two, and then you can see on the image on the right, you've got like a scrubber. If there's anything that's changed, you can scrub between the two to see what it does. You can also change the percentage of difference as well. So if you only slightly change bits, you could still get it to pass. I suppose you could cheat the system that way if you wanted to. Don't. So there's testing frameworks for like behavior-driven tests for JavaScript and all that fun stuff as well. Some of the like simpler front-end tests you can do, you can add in with Backstop with like Chromie.js or Puppeteer, so similar sort of interactions. There's a big post on JavaScript testing on Medium. I'm well over. So announcements. Successful design systems design patterns or design systems don't exist in a vacuum. You want to sort of tell everyone within your team or organisation that you've built stuff and it's ready and you've updated stuff. So you could, Carbon does like a highlight reel of what they've changed in the last release. Shopify do like a what's new. They seem to update once a month. And then Carbon also provide a changelog as well, so you can dig further deeper. Primary do a changelog as well, which is really good because it splits out what they've changed, like from the front end point of view that the user's going to see, or from the IDE of what you're going to see when you're doing stuff. Component status is also a good thing, so you can see that for Morningstar's design system, they've done the accordions for HTML and CSS, but they haven't built the web component for it yet. So you've got, and then also for like data tables, you've got a Jira issue, I think, to see where it's up to and stuff like that. And this one's Spotify's one, so it does the in development under consideration. You've got like a link to probably a GitHub issue there. And then Carbon also goes into the what frameworks it's also working with as well. So what do you do with a new component? This is taken from a post from Inialia de Leon. So when you get like a new component from design or something, you can match it with what you've already got. If it's kind of similar, can you just tweak some, add some more props or variables to sort of make it change, or do you really need to go all the way down to build a brand new pattern? At some point, patterns you build are gonna not be needed anymore, need to be deprecated for newer ones, or just completely put on fire, or disintegrated. So there's ways you need to think about ways to deprecate a pattern. This is from Bolt's design system, which is really code heavy, and they sort of add stuff into the schema to tell you that what you're using is deprecated. We kind of do the same thing with us. We wrap our Sass partials for the component in a mixin, and then it will spit out on the command line that you're using something old. And then also you can use npm's deprecate, which will tell you I think when you install it, it will tell you it's deprecated, and you can also leave a nice message saying use this instead. There's a nice post from Paul Stanton on Medium about retiring patterns as well. So quickly fly through some resources. Slack.Design Systems. I think there's like loads of people on it. I didn't have the number. It's really good for helping requests or showing off, what you've just released, or asking specific questions, setting up stuff. News.Design Systems it's almost weekly now, but it's unintentionally so. I'd rather not set myself at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. I have to launch the newsletter, come hell or high water. Great book from Alla Kornatova, designsystemsbook.com. That's from Smashing Mag. This has just been released from A-Press. I think you can only get the EPUB at the moment. This is from Mika Goldbolt on front-end architecture and design systems from a couple of years ago. The FEA.pub redirects to Amazon. Atomic Design from Brad Frost as well. And then that's it.